Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks, and this week we're taking a look at Bigsby vibratos. Why aren't they more popular? Okay, maybe popular isn't the right word. I guess depending on your point of reference, Bigsby's may be near enough ubiquitous, especially if you're a fan of Gretsch guitars. But search YouTube or Google for Bigsby, and as much as you will undoubtedly find glowing videos, reviews and references to them, you'll also find countless forum threads of people full of frustration and anger at struggling to operate them, struggling to get the best out of them, struggling to string them, and just flat out struggling to keep them in tune. And in that respect, they can be incredibly polarising, which I guess is my point of today's video. This year the Bigsby turns 70 years old, and despite not being a perfect design in any respect, I guess there is a case to be made that if something else in any other walk of life gave us as many potential problems as the Bigsby does, it probably would have gone the way of the Dodo a long time ago. Ultimately, nothing sounds like a Bigsby. It is truly unique, and in that respect, it's definitely not going anywhere anytime soon. As much as it is undoubtedly a flawed design in some respects, it's worth pointing out that 99% of the very common problems that people experience with Bigsby's are invariably down to user error. Now, I've been entirely guilty of that myself. My first kind of real-world experience that I ever had of a Bigsby was taking a Yamaha Revstar 720 on a 2-week tour in Europe. And to be honest, I spent the duration of every gig pushing it further and further out of the way so as not to knock it accidentally. It was going sharp, it was going flat, I had to restring it in the back of a van on bumpy Spanish back roads every day for a fortnight. Honestly, it was just a bit of a pain in the arse, and I increasingly found myself leaning heavily on my Telecaster throughout that tour, which I maybe had to tune once or twice for the entire run. When I got home, I decided to do the research that, in all honesty, I probably should have done before I left. And fast forward to today, and not only am I a huge fan of guitars with Bigsby's, some of my favourite guitars I've ever played, I've had them on them, but all of those problems which dogged me throughout that tour, I've not experienced in a very long time. So today's video, I'm going to break down a few tips and tricks which hopefully will help you get the best out of your Bigsby, and I wish I knew sooner. The first step in getting the best out of your Bigsby is, quite honestly, managing your expectations. It may sound obvious, but it's not a Floyd Rose, and it is definitely not meant to be used as such. You're going to get half a step, I guess, up or down in either direction, and anything more than that, you are going to be asking for trouble, irrespective of how well it is set up. It is worth remembering that the Bigsby does date back to the late 1940s. It was designed by Paul Bigsby, an ex-motorcycle racer, actually, who designed it in response to Merle Travis' complaint that he was struggling to keep his Kaufman vibrato, commonly acknowledged to be the first kind of commercially available mechanical vibrato for stringed instruments, struggling to keep it in tune. Paul Bigsby went away, analysed the Kaufman vibrato, and decided that, such was its flaws, he could do it better. So he did, and in 1951, the first Bigsby was actually given to Merle Travis as thanks for inspiring the innovation. Shortly later, the now famous spring was added, and thus the Bigsby that we know and love came into fruition. In 1953, there was a very brief association with Fender and their new Telecaster model. However, this ceased to be in early 1954 with the introduction of the Stratocaster, of course being equipped with its own tremolo arm, as Leo Fender put it. However, it was actually Ted McCarty at Gibson, the then president, who first realised the potential of a Bigsby on a mass scale, buying up near enough every unit that he could get hold of. Shortly later, an exclusive deal was struck between Gibson and Bigsby, and Paul Bigsby, true to his word, famously approached Ted McCarty to double-check that he was happy for Fred Gretsch, no guesses which guitar company he was in charge of, that he was happy for them to start using the Bigsby on their guitars. The point, of course, being that the Bigsby is over 70 years old. It comes from a simpler time when the wilder vibrato antics that we associate with the likes of Hendrix were near enough 2 decades away, in fact. And the magic and the majesty of the Bigsby lies not in its ability to dive bomb down 2 whole steps and come back up perfectly in tune, but much like the video I made recently on why I use neck vibrato, its ability to breathe life and energy in motion into otherwise static held chords or notes. That really is where it comes into its own. The second tip is hopefully a little bit more practical. Now, it's easy to think of a Bigsby as splitting the string into 3 sections. The part between the tuning peg and the nut, of course between the nut and the bridge where you play, and then between the bridge and the Bigsby. And when you use the vibrato, all of those sections change in tension. The issue then comes in if there's any friction in any one of those 3 sections. When you release the vibrato arm, the tension isn't equally divided between those 3 sections, which means you're out of tune. Of course, you adjust or compensate by tuning the string, by which point invariably the tension has evened out again, meaning you're out of tune for a second time. Ultimately, it can be an incredibly frustrating experience. Luckily, there are a few things you can do to help, the first of which is not particularly widely spoken about actually in regard to setting up or getting the most out of your Bigsby, and that is making sure that it's not screwed down so tightly to the guitar that it's causing friction, causing binding, which of course in turn will lead to tuning stability, or instability in this case. Now, an easy way to tell whether this is in fact the case, next time you're restringing and it has no strings on it, lift your arm up and see if it wants to flop freely back and forwards in either direction. If it does, you're gravy. If it doesn't, however, this means that it's probably binding and catching, which, as I said, is not good for the system. Look across the bottom of the guitar, and in the center of the bass plate of the Bigsby, there will be a piece of felt. Now, that is what you want the system to be resting on the guitar. Of course, remembering that most guitar tops are not perfectly flat, they're carved, they're contoured, and making sure that the Bigsby is as square as possible at the top of the guitar really is imperative. Now, ideally, you want to see a small gap or a small section of space between either side of the piece of felt. It's a quick enough adjustment with a screwdriver, and ultimately that will give you the ability to move that arm forward, back and freely and forwards, backwards, you know what I'm trying to say, which will lead to better tuning stability and the ability to just use the system more efficiently. Needless to say, eradicating as much friction or any instances of binding over the rest of the course of the guitar will also help massively when it comes to tuning stability. There are any number of guitar-orientated lubrication products which obviously profess to be the best in the business, but one thing I've always found that works particularly well, to be honest, is your common or garden lip balm. Now, I particularly like to use this Heather Honey, primarily because the sell-by date was roughly in 1985, so it's a relatively small chance my wife would actually try to use it as a lip balm. But just a dab of this in both the nut slots and the bridge slots will mean that the string can pass freely through it, lubricated, unhindered, which of course leads to increased tuning stability. Now, one obvious telltale sign that you do have binding somewhere is that telltale ping that you get on some Bigsby's, which sounds like this. Next up is another piece of practical advice to just make your Bigsby more enjoyable to play. And one very common complaint, in new Bigsbys especially, is that they are too stiff. Now, of course, different aftermarket springs are available, but one very easy, quick fix in a lot of cases is just to remove the spring, put it on a hard surface, and step up and down on it several dozen times. This will make the kind of compression and depression action much easier and much smoother, making it a more enjoyable experience under your palm. Lastly, an incredibly quick and obviously simple bit of advice, to be honest, that, again, I wish I'd known prior to trying to restring that Revstar every day for a fortnight in the back of a bumpy van, travelling all across Spain. And that's to pre-bend your strings. Now, to do this, simply stick the ball end of your string through the end of a pliers and curve the string or arc it around the end of the pliers, giving it a curved edge. This means it's easier to get onto the post and is much more conducive to the string actually staying where it's meant to be while you're trying to get it up the fretboard and tied around the tuning peg. One final failsafe is, of course, to clamp the string to the fretboard using a capo if you're not particularly confident on being able to hold on to it. Just all helps in aid of stability and making sure that it's not going to ping off frustratingly at the last minute. It can be a little bit of a fiddly job. And there you have it. Now, hopefully some of these tricks and tips were helpful if you're looking to get the best out of your Bigsby. As I said, they can make for an incredibly frustrating experience. I've experienced that myself on several occasions, but as I said, it's come down to user error, and as with anything, to be honest, just takes a very cursory bit of research in regard to not only how to get the best out of it and how it functions, but where it may be going wrong. Needless to say, if you've got any tips or tricks that you've stumbled across in regard to getting the best out of your Bigsby, let me know in the comments section down below. It'd be nice to think of this video as a bit of a resource for people going forward, should they be struggling. As ever, I'm Chris Buck. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon if you haven't already. I'm going to play you out now on my Squier Cabronita Telecaster, needless to say, equipped with a Bigsby, and I shall see you next week for another episode of Friday Fretworks. Cheers guys, take care, I'll see you soon.